Now, allow me to welcome Noura Al Sayeh, Head of Architectural Affairs at the Bahrain Authority for Culture and Antiquities, to tell us the story and the history of the Pearling Trail.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation. I will be brief and even briefer because I have a lot of overlaps with Robert's presentation and slides. I have the privilege of having you here, and also the disadvantage that I'm presenting a project that you saw live this morning. So I hope I have new things to add to what you've seen. So the Pearling Path is a project that was initiated by Her Excellency Sheikh Hamay bin Mohammed Al Khalifa as early as 2005. And the reason for the interest in this project was obviously twofold. First of all, there was a strong will and ambition to inscribe the rich legacy of pearling, which Robert very nicely highlighted previously with Bahrain, as one of the strongest cultural markers of national identity in Bahrain. One, that was apparent in the various professions that developed around it, but more importantly, I'm going to go quickly through them because Robert showed most of them. This is one of the oldest pearls that were found in Bahrain in Dar al-Klayb, which is not 5,000 years old, it's 3,000 years old. I have an even more zoomed-in version than the necklace Robert just shown from Shakhura, from the Tailus period, the Hellenistic period. And this lovely image that was taken by a very beautiful and resourceful book that was developed by the École Van Cleef in an exhibition last year, which is a book alongside Robert Carter's book that I highly recommend. And this is a picture from 1913 in front of the Wonkhausen Corporation headquarters in Manama of the oyster bed, of the oyster pearl bounties that was found that year. That shows the amount. These are the very valuable graphs from Rob Carter's book that we use very centrally in the Pearl Path that highlight the importance of pearl diving and pearls in the Gulf, and more specifically of Bahrain and the importance, the lion's share of the pearl industry that it held in the Gulf. What's important to say about pearling, and specifically pearling in Muharraq and in Bahrain, and probably in contrast to the first presentation we had in Fiji, the beautiful presentation, was that in Bahrain specifically, pearling built an urban society. These very beautiful small pearls built until the 1930s the whole urban fabric of Muharraq that you see. And this is one of the reasons why the project was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2012 under the official name of Pearling Testimony of an Island Economy, because everything that you see on this picture here was built through the pearling industry. So it's a really beautiful thought to know that something as small as the pearl built the whole city of Muharraq that you see, the whole start of urban society in Bahrain. And the challenge was then how to translate, this beautiful, vision that we have of Muharraq and its very close relation to the sea, with all the traditions that went along with it. This is a picture of the Boumahir Fort, which was one of the traditional celebrations that happened at the start of the pearling season, with the accompanying songs that would. These are some examples in Muharraq of Barasti settlements that were developed across the seashore. This is a beautiful image from the 1980s of the island of Muharraq, where you see how intact until the mid to late 1980s the urban fabric of Muharraq was, and its beautiful relation to the sea. The situation today is slightly different, as you can imagine. There was subsequent land reclamation projects that happened as early on as the 1910s or even earlier 1930s, which was happening traditionally in Muharraq because the society grew in relation to the prosperity that the pearling economy brought. Land was quite scarce. The seashore and the sea was quite shallow, so it was economically quite easy to reclaim. But this obviously, as society and as the country started to modernize, started to take rather larger proportions. And so you can see here on the map the extent, this is Qal'at Boumaher here, of historic Muharraq, the subsequent land reclamations that happened, the ring road that encircles now contemporary Muharraq, land reclamation since, this is an aerial picture from 2008, land reclamation has grown significantly. And so one of the challenges of the project was, how do we bring back the memory of the pearling into the city? How do we revive it? How do we reconnect the relation to the sea, which was completely intrinsic to the city of Muharraq through its urban pattern and through the architecture? And how do we do it through heritage and through the story of pearling? So this is the plan of the pearling path. I think that you walked this morning this segment from the Siyadi House to Fakhro House that you see here through the visitor center. The project is actually a serial nomination of 17 properties that you see here that snake through all the old historic quarters of Muharraq, connected by a pedestrian bridge that you see here that reconnects the pedestrian connection of the whole city of Muharraq to the coastline of Boumaher Fort. The idea behind the inscription was not necessarily to inscribe the most beautiful houses in Muharraq or the most architecturally significant, but it was really to narrate through pearling the story of the city of Muharraq. So there are 17 houses. I think that you went through them, so I'm not going to present each one of them individually, but that go from a small diver's house to the house of a pearl merchant in wood, the Amarat and the Su area, which Robert showed here and where the visitor center is, the Murad house, which I will also get back to, which was the house of a wealthy pearl merchant, the Nokhada house, which is very close to where we are. It's actually the house nearby, which was the house of a captain of a boat, and the Siyadi Majlis Mosque and house, which were a complex that was built by one of the wealthier pearl merchant families. So the idea is that these properties are connected by a pathway that snakes through the city, as we said. And as the project grew, one of the challenges was to address also the needs of the city as a contemporary one, to acknowledge also that Muharraq today is a contemporary city, and if we want to revive the legacy of pearling, we also need to make sure that it's a city that has all the commodities and the possibilities of a 21st century. And for us to make sure that the city remains thriving and revives the story, we also need to address issues that are larger than just the issues that are related to heritage and conservation. So following the inscription of the site, the project grew to accommodate 17 public squares, which you probably saw, 4 multi-story parking buildings that are going to add 1,000 parking spaces to the city to make sure that issues of mobility that are quite central to the problems of the city today are also addressed. Although, unfortunately, a lot of the architectural heritage which we see in this picture has today disappeared and been replaced by more modern buildings, we're quite lucky to have in Muharraq the urban profile of the city is still quite intact. The network of streets, the plot sizes, and so on are all intact. And this was something that was really important for us to make sure through the zoning and the building regulations that this would be something that would be safeguarded as the project evolves. So this was one of the first interventions that was developed for the wayfinding of the project. And so, you see here that the idea was really to have a minimal intervention on the city, to have a series of public spaces, which you see here, and very small wayfinding systems that are through the lights. I think you passed through some of these public spaces today during the walk, right? Yes, you saw them. So the idea behind these public spaces was really in an acknowledgement of the contemporary needs of the city, to acknowledge that the city today, although these public green spaces were not traditionally present in the city, that the city today had different needs than the city of the 1930s, and that there was a lack of green spaces, and more importantly, that the project was not only looking at heritage and tourists, but that it was also responding to the needs of the local community. And that it offered places of interaction where visitors and local residents could interact and socialize within the city. So these are a network of 17 public squares that follow the whole Pearl Path, that offer moments of rest and relaxation throughout the path. The idea behind them is that they're built on the footprint of houses that had been demolished. And the network of trees that you see here are rebuilt on the exact footprint of these houses. And the idea is, as the trees grow, they would create a canopy, a shaded canopy that creates a microclimate that in the warmer months of the year would provide a much more comfortable environment for people to be in, and that the canopy of the trees would recreate the footprint of the houses that had been demolished. And so this is another one of the pictures. This is one of the main squares near the Siyadi Majlis, which you see here, which I think you also visited, which is one of the main properties of the Pearling Path, and probably one of the most architecturally significant and expressive houses on the Pearling Path. It's the house of the Siyadi family, which were pearl merchants, and this house is really quite significant because it's one of the few examples in the Gulf of a house that has external signs of ornamentation. Normally in traditional Islamic houses, the ornamentations would always be on the inside of the houses, and this goes to show how prominent and how wealthy the pearl merchants had become at the height of the pearling economy in the 1930s, that they started to show external signs of wealth in there. This was the majlis of the house, and this is the inside of the majlis, which is going to be, as part of the pearling path, rehabilitated, of course, and transformed into a pearl museum, which you see an architectural model of, and there will be a small contemporary addition that will be added here that will host the jewelry of the Pearling Museum. This is a model of the Murad guest house, which is currently one of the largest courtyard houses in Muharraq, that will be transformed into a small guest house. It was really important for us, as part of the Pearling Path, that we also create places that create life within the city, that we didn't only add exhibition spaces and places, museum spaces that would not add to the life of the city, but that we would also contribute in creating a more active and vibrant life in the city. So it was important that there was a variety of programs along the path. This is an aerial picture of Muharraq, the area of the Amarat, very close to the image where Robert showed, which is one of the projects that was just completed less than a year ago, which is the main Pearling Path Visitor Center. So here you have an evolution of the site. These amaras, which were, let's say, warehouses or the local caravanserais, were located in this area of Muharraq, specifically at the intersection of the sea and the Su, which you see here, which is this main artery that crosses Muharraq. And they were here because they were the area of passage of the goods from the sea, where they would arrive to the boat, until they found their way to the Su. The site obviously changed a lot along the years, and today, in its current situation, before the project started, it was completely disconnected from the sea. It was inaccessible. So, Robert is one of the few people that remembers the way it was. And the idea behind the project, the architectural project that happened, was to create a canopy a roofed canopy of 7,000 square meters that would reconnect the two sides of the street that you see here. So let's say contemporary Muharraq with Avenue 10 here that was built on reclaimed land to the heart of the Souk, and to make this passage between both sides of the city accessible and public once again, while protecting the ruins of Amarat Yusuf Abd al-Rahman Fakhro, which are to be found under the canopy. I think you were here you were there this morning. So the idea was really to kind of create a scenography and a celebration of the ruins of these warehouses and amarat that were conserved and are now protected by this protective roof. This was one of the image of the state of the Amara before, and houses this building in the middle here, which acts as a community center, which has an exhibition space, workshop spaces, and is really meant to act like a center for the residents of Muharraq, which will host activities, rotating exhibitions, will have a cafe, and will really, serve as the main entrance point to the Pearling Path from the center of the project. The idea was also, one of the challenges of the project was that obviously Muharraq has changed a lot in the last 30 years, and most of the urban and architectural heritage of the Pearling Path are rather small or modest houses that are very intricately placed within the urban fabric. But it was really important for us as a marker within the city to have a project that spoke at the scale of the city on the whole, and that was really visible as a part of the city, and that invited people to kind of dive into this world of purling. And then another second project that we wanted to show, which was not directly linked to the registered properties of the Pearling House, of the Pearling Path, but is a project that was really important for us in reviving the intangible heritage related to purling, notably the Fajeri singing that used to happen on the Pearl diving boats to encourage the divers while they were away at sea for long periods of time. So this would traditionally happen in Muharraq in the city in a structure called the Dar, which is a small music house built around the typology of a majlis, so something that was quite interiorized. And it was important for the people that were practicing this music that they wanted to have more visibility in the city, and they wanted to accommodate larger groups of audiences that are interested to come in and listen to the music. And so we commissioned this small music house, which was built by Belgian architects called Office Kirsten Geers David van Severen. And one of the challenges that they had was to keep the footprint of the original Dar as it was, with the proportions of a traditional majlis, but at the same time to make the building more public when there was a performance. So the building has this facade that you see here, which is a mesh steel canopy that lifts off completely, like a small theater stage, when there is a performance. So that opens up completely, and the whole performance space becomes completely one with the urban fabric of the street. So you see here, so the performers still perform in the same proportion of space of the majlis that they usually performed in, but they become completely open to the public. Sorry, I'm having Robert problems. Here. Here. So the whole space of the Dar becomes completely transparent and open to the public and at night, and the whole street and surrounding neighborhood become somewhat the auditorium of the space. It's very important for us to introduce these contemporary programs or contemporary interpretation of traditional programs in the city to make sure that the city stays, a city that is young, that people want to live in, that has a cultural activity, and to make sure that this legacy of pearling is not only something that we're reflecting in the past, but something that will be transmitted as a living part of our heritage for future generations. So this is it. Thank you very much.